Welcome to Confessions of a Founder, a podcast where we pull back the curtain on the entrepreneurial journey. I'm Allie Berger, and each week I sit down with successful founders, CEOs, and innovators to explore the raw, real stories behind building a business. From the highs of success to the moments of self-doubt, we get into the lessons learned, risks taken, and the human side of entrepreneurship. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Confessions of a Founder wherever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us bring more stories of resilience and innovation to listeners like you. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in to today's Confessions of a Founder. Today's story is awe-inspiring, to say the least. Lisa Curtis is the founder of Kuli Kuli, the world's largest producer and distributor of moringa powder. Moringa is a plant chock full of wellness benefits, including protein and calcium. Lisa started the business in the 2010s with just $2,000 in her bank account after coming home from a Peace Corps tour in West Africa. Today, Kuli Kuli's products are featured in over 11,000 stores nationwide. In today's conversation, we talk fundraising, as Lisa's raised over $15 million at this point, growing globally, and partnering with massive corporations to further scale a business. Please share your name and what you have been building.
Yeah, my name is Lisa Curtis, and I'm the founder and CEO of Kuli Kuli, which I've been building for the past decade.
And you have one of the most internationally interesting stories I've come across in the process of founder stories. So I would love if you could share a little bit about what inspired you to start Kuli Kuli.
Yeah, so after college, I joined the Peace Corps in Niger, West Africa, and I was placed in a very rural village. If you can imagine, no electricity, no running water, was living in a house made out of mud. And as a vegetarian, I found that there wasn't a ton of really healthy food for me to eat. I was mostly surviving off carbs. And it was a diet that made me feel pretty terrible. And so I was volunteering at my village's health center, and I started asking some of the women there what I could eat to give me more energy, more protein, more vitamins, more nutrients. And they literally pulled these leaves off a tree and mixed them into a popular snack and said, "Here, eat this Kuli Kuli moringa. It'll make you feel better." And I had never heard of moringa leaves. Eating tree leaves sounded a little weird to me, but I totally trusted these women. I was like, okay, I'll do anything to make me feel better. So I started eating it, and it totally transformed my health in the way that nothing had ever done before and nothing has done since. Moringa is an extremely powerful plant packed with protein, calcium, vitamins, and minerals. It's also packed with all these phytonutrients that gives it some amazing medicinal benefits. So had a really incredible impact on me. And I started being like, how do I get more people to eat this plant? And the women I was working with said, we're not going to grow a crop that we can't sell. So how about you help us sell in the US? So I was 23 at the time, and I was like, sure, no problem. I'll help you sell it. And I had no idea what I was signing up for. Fast forward over a decade later, Kuli Kuli is the leading moringa brand in the US, and we now sell a whole line of climate-smart, community-grown superfoods, primarily in the form of wellness powders that you can add to smoothies or even water, and then gummies as well.
You are the largest purchaser of moringa in the world, right? If I read that correctly.
We are, yeah. We purchase, if you can sort of envision, about 15 shipping containers full of moringa powder per year. So a lot of moringa.
And now you are in 11,000 stores and growing across the US. But from what I read, you started with $2,000. Is that correct?
Yes. So I, got back to the Peace Corps with $2,000 in my bank account and basically poured it all into starting this company. So I came back and first got a day job because I needed to pay my rent. So I was working at a tech startup, and this was my like nights, weekends, every free moment trying to get this idea off the ground. And, I learned a lot about fundraising along the way. I joke, not joke, that I've raised literally every type of capital that exists from, crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, grants, donations, like strategic investments, Series A, Series B, kind of angel investors, VCs, sort of all of it because I had to. I didn't start with, a ton of personal capital to pour into the business. And I wanted a way to make this real and make it come to life.
You start with $2,000. You start writing a blog, which is how you met your co-founder, it sounds like.
Yeah. So my co-founder, Jordan, we'd actually met in high school. So we went to high school together, and then we reconnected when I was writing this blog and just talking about how there was this incredible plant, how I wanted a way to support some of the women I had worked with in Niger, and like how there should be a better way to connect, this like a community like the one I was working with in Niger to this incredible market in the US and find a way that benefits US consumers and also benefits small farmers. And so often there's like traders and middlemen and all those sorts of people in between. And I was like, why can't we just do this? Like, why can't we build an entirely new supply chain for this superfood and do it in like a really ethical and transparent way? And so he liked the idea. He came on to give advice was his initial role. And I was like, okay, stop giving advice. Now you're going to run this with me. And so slowly pulled him into it.
You are an impact B corporation, which is we talk to some on this podcast, and there are many who talk about the fundraising process without the impact focus to their pitch. But I think that as both of us being impact founders, that it's a different journey oftentimes. And so can you talk a little bit about how from day one, you really made sure that you were building the right kind of company?
Yeah, and we got B Corp certified like year one. It was a very early thing, and I thought of it not just as a certification. Okay, great. Here's a stamp we can put on our packaging, but more like this is a metric by which we should continuously improve on every single year. Like there are always things we can get better on, and we're not perfect. I think any company that says like, oh, we're knocking it out of the park, we're as impactful as we could be isn't trying hard enough. And so we have continued to make progress and, got a Best for the World honor one year. And I think, overall just want every aspect of our company, from the way that we source the ingredients, the types of ingredients we're sourcing, the packaging that we're putting those ingredients into, the co-manufacturers we're using, the transportation, like all of it to be as sustainable and, best in class as we possibly can.
When you went out to pitch the market on this, how did investors respond initially?
So it was, I think slightly different at the angel level versus the VC level. I distinctly remember being at this cocktail party with a few of our angel investors, and like one of them didn't know I was behind her, and she was talking about her investment in us. And she was like, I don't know if this is going to take off and make me $1 million, but at least I feel good about what they're doing. And so I think there were some angel investors who were like, oh, actually, I like that it's an impact. I understand that all angel investments are high risk, but like, at least it's a really cool impact and social enterprise to invest in. At the VC level, we started to build sort of the social purpose into our corporate structure a bit more. So we became not just a B Corp, but a full-fledged benefit corporation, which, in the same way that like organic is a sort of certification, B Corp is a certification, benefit corporation is a legal entity in the same way like C Corp or LLC is a legal entity. And that was a pretty good litmus test for investors for us to say like, hey, we're a benefit corporation. And the reason we became a benefit corporation is, you know, down the line, if we have one strategic who wants to buy us and another strategic who wants to buy us, and say one of them wants to give us $600 million dollars and the other one wants to give us $500 million dollars, but they want to like really invest in our supply chain and do all the like best practice, good for the world things, like we want to have the legal ability to take the lower offer because we think that it's better, not just for our shareholders, but for like all of our, kind of like people who we are responsible for, given being sort of like people, employees, planet, and investors.
All of that is amazing. And I love your distinction that you're making for the audience between B Corp and Benefit Corporation. A lot of people don't know that those are two separate things. We hear a lot of jargon in the impact entrepreneurship community. So thank you for the clarifications on that. It's really helpful. I heard an interview that you did recently where you talked about structuring your board. And I think that you did it in a really smart and thoughtful way that I have not heard very often. So I would love to hear your thought process around that, if you can share, and any advice that you might have for newer entrepreneurs who are thinking about, as they're bringing on capital, the kinds of decision makers that they want to have at different levels of the business.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me personally, I have found that in the food industry, you see a lot of female founded, female led businesses where the CEO gets pushed out somewhere near the like 10 to 20 million range where they start to maybe go for private equity capital. Um, and that was something I was very clear that like, this is my company. I want to continue to run this company. I don't want anyone to kick me out. And so I actually had a conversation with some of our investors about how we only wanted to give one investor board seat out with between our Series A and our Series B, just one for both of them. But that we were going to have two board seats for independents, for people who, we thought were industry experts, who we, me, myself, and my co-founder Jordan nominated these people, but our investors had final say to like confirm them. When we actually had a whole process where we interviewed a bunch of people, had our investors involved in the interviews, and then brought on some really, really stellar independent board members. And it's been a really great way of having just a diversity of voices on the board, in the sense that there are, operators, like people who are running brands, who've built brands, who, just understand our landscape. And then there's also like investors, and we have investor observers. So the rest of our major investors who don't have a board seat still come to our board meetings. They still get to hear all the things, but just at the end of the day, the governing is done by 5 people, 2 of whom is me and my co-founder, 2 of whom are independents, and 1 is an investor.
How hard has that been to maintain? And have you had to exit conversations with potential investors as a result of that kind of request?
It has helped that our largest investor is a strategic. So our largest investor is Kellogg. And they have been very supportive of this idea. And so having, I think, the person who has the most capital at the table saying like, we support this, we understand what Lisa's trying to do, and we are following this, makes it really hard for somebody who's putting in a smaller amount of capital to say like, no, but I need a board seat.
I want to jump back into the farmers market for a second, and how Kuli Kuli was able to take off, because I think that's really important to know. Where did your first major customers come from, and your first kind of big win? What did that look like?
Yeah, so basically got back from Peace Corps, started to sell and sample at a farmer's market, not with the idea that that was going to be our growth path, but really with the idea of that being a really great way to do some super low cost consumer research. So I really wanted to know that before I quit my day job and went all in on this crazy moringa, superfood company, that there were people who would actually buy this product. So got together with some friends who eventually became co-founders, and we started making bars first, or we started making products first in like our home kitchens, testing them out, friends, family, then going to a commercial kitchen. Ended up deciding on bars as being kind of our first vehicle to get moringa out there, and had a pretty kind of elaborate surveying process. We called it a shotgun survey, where everyone who came by, we took down basic demographics. Did they have kids with them? What did they sample? What did they like? What did they not like? And then what did they purchase? And so we had over 500 surveys by the end of like a couple month period of, getting a really good sense of what people liked, what they didn't like, and what our target consumer profile looked like, and also what our conversion rate looked like. So that was data that we then took to Whole Foods. Well, technically we got a little bit lucky. A Whole Foods forager came by the farmer's market and was like, "This is cool. You should come meet with a Whole Foods bar." And we were like, yes, we would love that.
Wait, what is a Whole Foods forager, just so I know?
Yeah, so it doesn't exist quite in the same way that it did a decade ago, but a forager at Whole Foods, and they still have like regional foragers, is someone who's on the lookout for like new brands, interesting products. Their whole goal is to find, people like Kuli Kuli who are like in that early nascent stage, but like have big aspirations and are doing something unique. Like that's kind of a big part of Whole Foods' ethos. I think even today is they want to have really unique, innovative products.
Very cool. I didn't even know that was a job. Thank you.
It's a sweet job. It's a really sweet job. Although you do get bombarded with lots of little brands like me, reaching out. Hey. But yeah, then we through that got our first meeting with Whole Foods, and it was amazing because we came in with a ton of data on like, here's our conversion rate, here's what our customer looks like, here's what they like about us, and we're able to sort of give a compelling pitch, even though at the time we were still making bars by hand and like everybody had a day job. This was like a total side hustle, but it made us look more legit for sure. And that was when they said yes to authorizing us in Northern California, which at the time I was like, oh, we're authorized, we're in all the stores, and had not realized that we were just authorized to be in the stores. But my job then became, I quit my day job and drove around store to store selling us in each store. We were authorized to be there, but each store got to decide if they wanted to bring us in. So I would sell us in and then stand there and like pass out samples and talk to customers. It was quite the process.
And how do they determine if they're going to keep you on as a product and give you more shelf space or not? Is it based on how successful your tests are?
Yeah. So it was all, that category I think is reviewed like twice a year. And they look at certainly velocities, how it's doing. And then we worked really hard to get good velocities. And so we started to get interest from other regions. So we got the Pacific Northwest brought us in. We got Southern California brought us in. And then we had a pretty amazing opportunity to partner with the Clinton Foundation and this smallholder farmers group in Haiti to help reforest Haiti with moringa trees and source moringa from Haiti that we use to produce an entirely new product that Whole Foods agreed to launch nationwide. So that was a wild journey. And again, I think, goes to show that like social enterprises can punch above their weight. Here we were like working with the Clinton Foundation, working with Whole Foods Global, working with, Timberland got involved, Jose Andres got involved. So there's a lot of really cool partnerships around that that came together to bring that to life. And so that meant we went from like basically zero to a nationwide brand in 2 years.
So you had to have a lot of product available to stock on shelves. That takes a ton of capital. Where is that coming from at this point?
Yeah, so I spent the first 2 years of the business, I basically was selling, I was either selling product or I was pitching investors. That was all I did all the time. Every night went to whatever pitch event I could find. And we ended up raising a $1 million seed round in two separate tranches. So first 500K was like pulling teeth, trying to get angel investors. And then the second round, after Whole Foods had said they wanted to launch us nationwide, was way easier because I think investors saw that like, oh, this is the milestone. We have no money. We literally don't have enough money to manufacture the product to make this happen. So your investment's going to go a long way. And I think people got on board with that. But yeah, in the early days, kind of like prior to the seed round, we did a Kiva loan, we did grants, we did an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, which is donation based. We then did an equity crowdfunding campaign, and subsequently then did like the seed round, Series A, Series B. So we have raised and debt. So I think we have raised, if you add all of that up, close to like 15 million in different sources of capital.
Wow. Wow. You have the grit. I'm so appreciative that you're talking about how many years this takes, because I think so many people think, oh, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to go pitch it and in the first 3 months, I'm going to close my round and build the thing and we're done in a year and now I can scale it up bigger. And I so rarely hear those stories. So for you to say this took so many years to be the biggest moringa supplier in the world is an incredible journey that takes all of that. Where does that grit come from for you?
For me, it really comes from the impact. I mean, I'm at my heart, I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. Like, I am not here to like, oh, let's build this huge business and get rich. Like, I think there's way easier ways to make money than starting a business. I think that what inspires me every day is just like the impact we're able to have on our suppliers and how like we really are supporting small farmers to have access to a market they had never dreamed of. Many of the folks we work with are like subsistence farmers. They're just making enough to like sustain them and their families, and being able to grow and sell moringa gives them income. They can provide better food for their families. They can send their daughters to school. It just has such an incredible impact that's the highlight of my job, is when I get to go in the field and kind of see what Kuli Kuli's helped to create.
Last question on fundraising, and then I want to get into all the good stuff of leading a team and impact and all of that. If you had to start over again today and raise capital for a business, would you do it the same way? And if not, what would you recommend as the alternative to other founders?
It's so hard because I have no regrets. I think like we ended up with some great investors. I'm, super happy with the way that we have grown. I think there are some different sources of capital that weren't really around in the same way that they 10 years ago. For example, I think some of the like revenue based financing in terms of like an investment that is tied to revenue and has like a kind of a different payback that's not quite debt, not quite equity, is really interesting. I know a lot of the slow money community is doing a lot there. I think there are more foundations that are doing some interesting work in the impact investing space, and doing kind of like PRI, program related investments that would have been great if we'd gotten some more of those early on. But I think it's all been a good learning process. And at the end of the day, like, it would have been nice to have not had to fundraise as early as we did. And I sometimes get this question of like, well, why don't you just do like, wait and get a better valuation when you were like $1 million in sales? And where would I have funded the first $1 million of operating expenses? Like, I think if I had the luxury of not having to raise, absolutely wouldn't raise as early as we did. But we really needed that capital to get going.
to get going to build this incredible company that you've grown. And one of the things that I have heard you talk about in the past is the power of community. And just when you were talking about what gets you up in the morning and the impact that you can see the passion exuding from you. How does that translate to a company or a professional organization? And what kind of culture were you looking to build and community to grow?
Very much looking for a like company that has a lot of people who I would be excited to share the joys and the pain of, doing this with, and really wanted people who had a learning mindset. I think one of the things that we talk about all the time is nobody knows how to do this. Like nobody's built a global supply chain of moringa from scratch. Like nobody has done this with like baobab with all these ingredients. Like we are trying to do something unique, something really different. And we need people who are excited to not just share their skills, but also continue to develop new skills and like learn as we go. So that's one of our core values as a company. And we also really want people who are really excited about the mission. I think that is something that really drives me. It's something that really drives my co-founder. And we continue to, try as much as possible to like get folks from our team into the field and like, let's go, meet some of the farmers and get to know kind of the impact behind our business a bit better.
What about with partners? Because that's a really unique type of dynamic to have, especially with a company like Kellogg, where traditionally they have followed a playbook that is vastly different from your own.
It was sort of funny to like when the big announcement of like, Kuli Kuli being Kellogg's first investment, everybody's like, the maker of Frosted Flakes is investing in this like unknown African superfood. What is going on? And I think we really liked that they do a lot, particularly on the foundation side. The WTK Kellogg Foundation does a ton around nutrition around the world. Also the fact that, Kellogg was started by a vegetarian. They're trying to create healthier breakfasts than what was available at the time. And so it's kind of like an interesting business. And, we were very lucky to be able to spend like an hour and a half with the CEO of Kellogg at the time, just kind of talking about things. And the thing that he kept saying that just like was sort of shocking coming from like, a Fortune 500 company. He's like, I want to learn from you guys. Like, I want to be more like a startup. Like, I want Kellogg to have more of this entrepreneurial spirit. And that kind of like learning mindset and like interest in collaboration was really what struck us and made us think like this is a really cool partnership. We should do this.
You mentioned that they are super international in their footprint on nutrition, and you have had to grow an extremely international footprint for Kuli as well. How did you go about building these networks outside of just the village of folks that you were already connected to create this massive network of farmers?
Yeah, so on the supply chain side, I mean, it definitely involved a lot of sourcing trips, a lot of talking to people, a lot of trying to parse through like, who is really doing this in a really great way. We feel very fortunate to have had a lot of the same partners who we've been working with for like 7+ years now. So we've had some great relationships that continue to grow over time, and we're also making new relationships. And yeah, for me, it's really about like, understand what motivates them, what drives them is the same thing that drives us. Because you can get all the impact stats from afar. You can like try to assess everything. And at the end of the day, I think it's about leadership and what kind of organization they're building, what kind of organization we're building, and do those two align.
How do you tactically grow the highest quality moringa in the world and ensure that you're able to keep that quality? The process is spread out over so many continents.
So we do a ton of testing. We have some pretty clear standards on what we're looking for, and There's a lot of moringa that doesn't meet our standards. I would say most moringa doesn't meet our standards. Um, the interesting thing about moringa for folks who have tried it before, you'll probably resonate with this. Like, you don't eat moringa because it tastes amazing. Like, it is in the same way that like kale is like, a somewhat bitter green. Like, you gotta like doctor it a little bit to make it taste incredible. Like, moringa is the same way. And so you're eating moringa not for the taste, you're eating it for the health benefits. And we want to make sure that our moringa is grown in really high quality soil. So we do soil testing. We want to make sure that there's no pesticide contamination. We test for pesticides. We want to ensure there's no heavy metals. We test for those. We want to ensure that there's no high levels of bacteria that could get people sick. We test everything 3 to 4 times before we sell it, and at each phase of the process, and ensure that everything that we sell, we feel really good about.
So for somebody who's new to moringa, and you just said it doesn't always have the best flavor profile, maybe compared to the massive amount of benefits, what are some of the best ways you can use it day to day right now in order to hit that goal of feeling your peak energy you mentioned, or all these other ways of feeling great?
I mean, the cool thing about Kuli Kuli's offerings is we have the straight moringa powder for the diehard people like me who like want to add just, a couple tablespoons to their smoothie, or I add it to my oatmeal every morning. And then we also have like a whole line of moringa gummies and lattes and other ways in powders, other blends to get this amazing superfood into your diet and not have the just like straight green, hardcore green. We got something for everybody. But in terms of recipes with moringa powder itself, I mean, it is very versatile. Like, I put it, because I have 2 kids, I put it into their banana bread and like muffins and like sauces, pesto in particular, or guacamole. We make avocado toast with moringa. It just gives like a really amazing nutritious boost to anything you're eating. And especially if you're trying to like sneak some greens in your diet or your kids' diet. And it's really great for that.
It's so crazy that it is the national vegetable of the Philippines, right? And yet most of us have never even heard of it or know what to do with it.
Totally. And we use an accounting team based in the Philippines, and it's so fun working with them because they're obsessed with moringa, not from us. From they're like, oh yeah, of course, everybody knows about moringa. And we're like, yeah, everybody should know about moringa.
So much of the process, though, is education, I would imagine, in that kind of a position. What are the tips and tricks that you've learned along the way as you've tried to educate consumers about moringa?
Quite a few. So I tell people, start small. Every body is different. Moringa it's very high in fiber. It has a lot of really powerful nutrients. So you want to like start small, kind of like build up your gut bacteria and like help your body adapt to this powerful superfood. I tell folks you can use it in the same way you use matcha. You can make like a latte with it. You can make moringa cookies. I just made the other day for one of my friends who just had a baby, moringa lactation cookies. It's great for lactation. And I often find like for folks who are caffeine sensitive, tend to recommend eating it earlier in the day. It's not going to like keep you up all night, but it does give you a really amazing sustained energy boost just from the nutrients. And so I'm very caffeine sensitive. I don't drink coffee, and I take moringa in the morning, and that's like all I need to feel really good. And I think the thing that we hear from our customers all the time is that once they start taking moringa, and then if they like travel or they stop for whatever reason, they feel a difference. And that's really what we want all of our products to be, is something that if you stop drinking it or, eating these gummies, you actually feel a difference and you feel like something is missing because these are providing nutrition that you can feel.
I love it. And I'm so excited. I'm actually going to have a Kuli Kuli latte after our call for my afternoon pick-me-up. So, question for you, because I know that obviously you've talked about a lot of the wins, but we both know the reality of entrepreneurship is a lot of ups and downs. What has been the biggest challenge that you've faced, and how have you overcome that?
Oh, so many challenges. I think, you know, in the early days, just the level of rejection was really hard. I think for a while it was really hard for me to separate myself from the company. It felt like when investors were saying, that's a crazy idea, that's never going to work. And there was some amount of like, little girl, you don't know anything, you've never even worked in a food business, let alone, starting a food business. It just, that got to me. I like have a whole spreadsheet of investors that have said no, and it's close to 500 people. So it's just constantly pitching, constantly getting rejected. I think I gamified it. I just like started keeping track of like, all right, how many no's can I get this week? Great, let's get a few more. And just trying to like turn a positive spin on it. There was a really hard moment a few years ago where so one of my co-founders, Jordan, he's still with the business. He and I went to high school together. I also, when I came back, I connected with Jordan when I was abroad, but I brought in my childhood best friend as another co-founder because she had experience in consumer packaged goods and she was interested. And we grew up together like sisters. And I think, unfortunately, just in some ways, like fought like sisters, it just got to a point where we weren't working well together and it was having an impact across the entire company. And I had to fire her. And firing your childhood best friend is not something I ever wish on anyone. It's sad. We grew up together and we've sort of gotten over it, but we're not friends in the way that we used to be. And I think business can destroy relationships, and so I think just being really, really careful about who you start your business with, and ensuring that you have the right levels of communication, the right guardrails, that you're both striving towards the same thing is so key to starting a successful business and also not destroying friendships or family relationships in the process.
How did you handle the culture of the company after that? I'm feeling for you, that's a really hard decision to make.
Yeah, it was a hard one to come back from. I think it was honestly hardest on me than on anyone else. I think everybody else, it was like, oh, well, these two people aren't working together. We can see the tension. Like the whole company kind of felt it. Like obviously something needs to change. And so it felt a little more obvious for everyone else. I think for me, it was just like a profound loss that still feels hard.
And there's a lot of vulnerability that has to come with that, I would imagine, in terms of what you're sharing. And I know that we all talk a lot about the power of vulnerability in today's world with teams. Can you share, have there been any moments where you've been able to be vulnerable with people that you're working with and where that actually led to a breakthrough or greater collaboration?
Yeah, I think one of the big moments was really in COVID. So as you understand, running an international business during COVID, when a lot of shipping, transportation, everything was shut down. And also, at the time we were supposed to launch into 800 new Walmart stores in March 2020. So the combination of like sitting on millions of dollars of inventory, not having sales come in, not having product go out, it almost killed us. We ended up having to fire half of our team. So downsized really significantly and just had some moments where we just kind of like, with the folks who were left, just had a conversation and said, hey, you guys, like, I don't know if we're going to make it. I'm going to do everything I can. Like, I believe this business needs to exist in the world. And I think there's so much more we can do. And like, I'm going to give it my all to get us out of this, but we are in a hard place. And I think people really resonated with that. Like everyone who remained at the company didn't leave. We didn't have anybody quit. We had a lot of understanding, a lot of like, okay, we're a small team. We're going to rally. We're going to get through this together. And, not to like put a cherry on top of a hard experience. But in some ways, it helped us build the team and kind of reduce, like get efficient and streamline and like finally achieve profitability in a way that we weren't able to before, and set us up for, now we're in a really great growth trajectory and like things are much better. But I think that like just, brass tacks, like we had to like cut down everything, kind of showed us what we're capable of.
That takes a lot of emotional courage as a founder. And I think so much of what we talk about in the world of entrepreneurship makes the founder role sound a little bit like a robot. Like, these are the things that you do because these are the things that are best for the business and profitability and success. And I would love to know, how do you account for and stay authentic to the humanness of Lisa throughout this process?
Yes, it's yeah, the humanness is hard. I mean, in that moment, like I just have this distinct memory of like my husband coming into my home office at the time. I was 8 months pregnant, and I was like sitting on the floor just like bawling and be like, I don't know if this is gonna work. So I think it really has to do with like having a really great support network, like having, family and friends and colleagues and people who you can share these things with and be like, yeah, this is so hard and we're going to get through it together, and we're going to, try our best and see what happens, and hopefully it all works out. But like, if it doesn't, we know that we tried our best. And I feel really grateful to have, incredible community. My co-founder, Jordan, I could not do this without. He is incredible. He's kind of like yin to my yang. And then, also just having a great team. Like, our team is awesome. And I'm so excited to like wake up and go to work with these people. They're so talented. And yeah, I think the last thing is like self-care. Like, I almost like don't like calling it self-care because that puts such it's there's so many connotations around self-care. Like, for me, it just means like, have I slept enough? Have I eaten good food? Have I gone on a run? Which for me is like not like running, to stay fit. It's like my mental health practice is like going on a run every morning. And if I've done all those things, then like, yeah, I can build some resiliency and I can like handle all of the ups and downs of building a business and trying to parent and be present and, be a friend and mom and wife and all of that. So I think having some amount of just like grace with yourself and knowing what you need to have your own resiliency is just key for any founder.
Thank you for being so open and honest. And oh my gosh, to go through, that's crazy that the first question that I asked you about overcoming hard things, you didn't even mention that you were 8 months pregnant at the time and you told it the first part of it, which is really, it shows you how we think about ourselves. That separation of human and business is pretty fascinating. But something that you just said really resonated with me, because I can't help but wonder, when you talk about Jordan and the relationship that you have as co-founders, your energy that you give off is so rare. When I see people talk about co-founders, we both know that is one of the biggest reasons that businesses break up. You mentioned even yourself having to go through really hard interpersonal conflict with leaders in your organization. What is the secret sauce that makes you both work?
Oof, I mean, we have been doing it for a long time. I think one of the things that's very key for us is having relationship check-ins, as we call them, where, he is not my life partner. Let's be clear. I have a husband. This is my business partner. Sometimes people are like, oh, girl, guy. But we go on walks around Lake Merritt, and we have a hour plus long walking conversation where we start off of just like, how are you as a human? Like, what's going well in your life? What's challenging in your life? Like, just, tell me more about how you're doing as a person. And before we talk about anything business related, and then we talk about, okay, how is work feeling for you? Like, what's going well? What's frustrating you? What are ideas that you have to improve it? And we kind of just let those conversations like meander and take whatever turns they need to, and both answer, both sides of the question of like personal highs and lows, professional highs and lows, try to problem solve through things. We try to, have like really, really good adventures together. I mean, we both love to travel and we love other cultures. And that's, I think, part of what drew us to start Kuli Kuli is just having this love for like cross-cultural connections. And so we do some pretty awesome sourcing trips, which are the highlight, right? For both of us of, when we get to like go gallivant off and visit 5 countries in 10 days and see, amazing, amazing farmers and entrepreneurs on the ground doing incredible work that we are a part of.
You've traveled to a lot of countries and seen a lot of different teams. What is the biggest learning lesson that you've taken from how teams operate outside of the US that domestic founders could implement into their own businesses?
Oh man, I think it's just the scrappiness. Like, I think of a lot of the African entrepreneurs we work with in particular, and when they talk about their financing journeys, it is so much harder than any American I've heard of. It is a different market. There is not the same structure of angel investors and venture capital and banks providing, founder friendly loans. Like, it's really different. And so the way that people like bootstrap their businesses and gain traction, and also the challenges of just like running an agricultural business. It's like, oh, the rains didn't come, we lost, $200,000, like stuff like that, where I'm like, you have to have a level of grit and resiliency that I have yet to see in any American entrepreneur. I am always so inspired when I talk to our partners.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. Even here, it feels hard to navigate at times as a founder. And you hear a lot of people say the same thing. But to your point, if that infrastructure doesn't even exist, then where do you go?
Yeah, totally.
We've covered a lot of ground today. I would love to know what the best piece of advice you've ever received is.
Oh, there's so much. I think one of the things that somebody told me very early on, when I was sort of in the early stage of like, how do I start Kuli Kuli? How did I get it off the ground? She was like, why don't you go work at a startup and learn how to fail on someone else's dime, and then go start your own company? And so that's one of the things I tell folks of like, who are like, oh, startups sound really interesting. I want to start an own company. I've never worked at a startup. I'm like, just go. Like, even if it's like a summer internship or something, like, get a feel for what that feels like. Understand, like, how do you kind of fail your way forward in startup life, and like figure out if that's the right life for you, because it is absolutely a journey.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you think would be good for the audience to know about you and your journey and your lessons that you've learned?
I think the other sort of thing I would say is that when I was first starting out, I spent a lot of time lamenting the fact that we were not big, and I just wanted to be, millions of dollars in revenue and producing hundreds of thousands of products. And then now that I'm big and, all the time I'm like, oh man, remember in those early days when we could just like tweak things on a dime, like, create something in our commercial kitchen one day and like change it entirely the next day based on like consumer feedback. And like when we can get insights from the farmers market, like I think a lot of startup founders are like, oh, this early days, like I just need to get bigger. I just need to get bigger faster. And they kind of lose the magic of the things you can do and the ways that you can like pivot and move fast and make quick decisions and learn really fast when you're really small. And so I'm not saying you need to stay small, but I think like embracing the magic of where you are and not lamenting where you're not.
Oof, that one hits home. I needed to hear that today. Thank you. Thank you. Pitch yourself. You have some big, exciting things that have recently happened. Share with the audience what you're working on.
Yeah, so we just launched a whole new product line that I think might be our best, tastiest products we've ever made. It is a line of organic superfood lattes. So these are crafted with moringa, with other cool ingredients like baobab and hibiscus and purple tea. Maybe some ingredients you've never heard of, but maybe you should. So there's a matcha moringa latte, there's a strawberries and cream, like gut health latte, there's an ube coconut latte. Would love for folks to try it out. Available on our website, kulikulifoods.com, also available on Amazon, also in Sprouts Farmers Market nationwide, and soon to be Whole Foods Market nationwide.
Can you explain why the first ingredient you talked about is so magical?
Baobab, yes. Baobab is so cool. It is a tree that grows all over the African continent, only grows in really hot, dry places. It looks like an upside down tree because it's got like these huge gnarled things. It grows for thousands of years, super drought tolerant, and it produces inside of this fruit is a powder. So it's this raw fruit powder that you're consuming that's like tangy and delicious and packed with nutrients and so good for gut health and also great for hydration. So in the same way that it helps it's almost like a cactus like plant. It's actually the world's biggest cactus. And those same properties that this tree like stores and then produces this fruit kind of can help your skin. It can help just like your overall body. It's a really cool plant.
I'm excited to try it. Lisa, Congratulations on all of your success. It has been a pleasure having you on Confessions of a Founder, and I'm so excited to see what's next for Kuli Kuli.
Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Founder. And great news, Kuli Kuli has gifted a 20% discount to all Confessions of a Founder listeners. To redeem your code, go to www.kuli.com and type in confessions at checkout. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and took away valuable insights from our incredible guest. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this episode with someone in your life who could use a little entrepreneurial inspiration. We'll be back next Tuesday with another founder who's ready to share their story, their struggles, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So be sure to tune in, and until then, keep chasing your vision and embracing the journey. Thanks for listening.